welcome back to Normal Island. I'm Curtis Daly. It's been a while, actually. I was away for a week. I don't know if you can tell, but I've got a bit of a tan, maybe not. But things are back to normal. I'm very happy to be back in the hosting chair. Of course, if you watched me early on Navara and you've come over, good to see you again. For those that didn't watch Navara, it's the first time seeing you tonight, so hello. I'm very happy because I'm joined by the wonderful Noffel. Noffel, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, Curtis. It's good to see that you're back. It's been a while since we haven't hosted together, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been too long. I feel personally very upset. It's not your fault, though, but it's the way things go. But we've got a very, very good show for you tonight. 4 stories, actually. So this is what we've got coming up for you tonight on the show. A bombshell poll has Corbyn-Sultana party even with Labour. Labour U-turns and embraces trickle-down economics. A girl sent home from school to perform a speech for Tommy Robinson. And then later on, we've got an interview with the Greens organised group. As always, remember to like the stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. You know what to do. Of course, we'll be getting 2 comments at the end. So make sure you're very busy in the chats. But let's on with the show and on to our first story. A bombshell poll has put a new Corbyn-Sultana party even with Labour. Reform way ahead with 34%. The Tories regained second with 17%. And then Labour and this new left party are even Stevens with 15%. Notice a big drop in support for the Greens. But it's not just this poll. There's other ones that show support for this new left party. So here you can see the JCZS party on 8%. The first poll that included them. Now, polls are polls, right? We are far away from a general election, but it doesn't mean polls are worthless. Now, many of the commentariat have weighed in, accusing the party of being splitters. We haven't heard from Paul Mason in a while, but anytime he can punch left, he takes that opportunity. Corbyn-Sultana and the Let Nigel Win party. Even Lord Kinnock called it the Farage Assistance Group. I mean, have they not been paying attention, right? Reform has consistently topped the polls before this new left party was even on the scene. But in any case, this is Labour's fault. Need I remind them of this clip?
If you don't like that, if you don't like the changes that we've made, I say the door is open and you can leave.
So that is Keir Starmer telling the left of the party to leave. And guess what? They did. You reap what you sow. Noffel, what do you make of these polls? I mean, do you think they're just outliers? Or is this something that we should take seriously? And what does this mean for the Green Party?
Well, I think what's really interesting here is the whole talk of splitting the vote amongst the left. Because the truth is, letting Farage in would not be the fault of Corbyn or Sultana being completely alienated from the Labour Party. It would be the fault of the Labour Party for purging left-wingers, and it would be the fault of the Labour Party for not focusing on economic issues. Now, like you said, it's quite early to say. We can't say for sure what this will be looking like in a couple of years' time. We can't also be sure of how this will eat into the Greens' vote. But I think what is promising is the fact that Zach Polanski, along with Corbyn, have talked about possible alliances. And I think that's really important because although Zach Polanski under the Green Party could see a massive populist shift, the main issue will be getting that vote in urban areas. Now, we know Corbyn has already had success before with momentum, of course, mobilizing a lot of young people. And that's what we're seeing with these polls. Most of that support is coming from the young demographic. And so I think it's really important that if there is to be this party that's kicking off, because the formation is quite loose at the moment, if there is a proper party structure to this, it needs to be in alliance with the Green Party, and they need to look at specific seats and where they can target specific voters. But at the same time, the second part I want to talk about is the fact that it's completely reflective of what's going on right now within the Labour Party. And the fact of the matter is, you have new people making a party, and you have people not reforming the Labour Party simply because Labour do not care about the working class in the UK. They do not care about ending the austerity agenda, and they do only care about continuing neoliberalism. And so I think this speaks to people's issues, and I think this speaks to the foundation of what a left-wing party could look like in the UK, except for the Greens, purely because Labour aren't being asked to step up and genuinely look at the main issues we're facing in the UK at the moment.
I mean, we've got 104 Labour MPs who are sort of signalling to the leadership that there needs to be a change in direction. They've been saying we need to tackle people's material needs a bit more. Some people are saying it's the Mandani effect. Others are saying it's probably the rise of the Greens and this new left party. Do you think it's that? Because we could have told everyone that years ago, right? We could have said that when Keir Starmer became leader or during the general election. If the Labour Party doesn't radically and meaningfully go for people's material conditions, they're not going to get much support. And these 104 MPs have sort of ignored that up until now. So why do you think there's been a shift? Do you think it's because of this new party? Do you think it's because of Zach Polansky? Is it an amalgamation of all of it? Or do you think it's something completely separate?
I think the Labour Party cannot continue to do trickle-down economics and pretend like everyone's going to fall for it. I think that's the main issue here. Of course, you have different catalysts like Mamdani that had a massive success with his radical program. You have Zach Polansky stepping up and talking about eco-populism, of course, also focusing on working class concerns. But I think the main issue is just the Labour Party's complete inability to talk about which direction they're heading in, right? Because the further you move to the right, the more you alienate your voter base, and the more you move to the left, which they're not doing, it seems like they'll get the whip removed. And so I think it speaks to the complete unwillingness of the Labour Party to talk about what they want and the reflection that Starmer is giving to the general population of the vote share that they got in the current election. And that is a more middle class voter base compared to a working class voter base. And they're trying to retain that vote. And so is Morgan McSweeney. But at the same time, it's not captivating the low propensity average voter. So going forward, everything that will aid to the Corbyn-Sultana party and whatever green lines they may have will be because of Labour.
I mean, do you think this poses a problem for Zach Polansky and the Greens? I know, obviously, Zach Polansky was kind of signalling that he was open to working with this new party, but the polls do show where this new Zara Sultana Corbyn party succeeds, it is mostly coming from the Greens. The Greens in a lot of polls have been showing 12, 30%, which is really impressive numbers. And even in some polls, beating the Liberal Democrats. As soon as you chuck in this other party, there they go straight down to 5%. So is this a problem? Maybe for the Green Party. And also, you can answer that question, but a separate question is, regardless of what you feel about the Green Party, is this good for us because the left is occupying more spaces? They've sort of transcended political boundaries within political parties.
Well, generally speaking, the left has gained a lot of popularity within the Green Party because the left has been politically homeless, right? That is why you had a massive surge in the Green Party simply because there was no one representing economics that were focused on working people, that were talking about not scapegoating minorities such as immigrants and trans people. So a part of the Green Party's population increase has obviously been because there is no left foundation there. So I think it would, and polls have suggested that it would eat into the Green Party voter base, right? That being said, I think it's really, really important, as I mentioned before, and Polanski sort of hinted at this, to have a broader left alliance. And like you've talked about, like Polanski has also messaged, which I think he's personally doing a very good job at, even with the announcement of this party, he said that any sort of tackling or attempt to tackle reform is a good thing. And I think that fundamentally shows a shift from Starmer's Labour Politburo, which is, claiming that it's all about country before party, but in action, he's actually showing that it's party before country. So I think this is a sort of return to a left-wing movement within the UK. Of course, those take a couple of years to build back up, but like you said, I think it's regardless of eating into the Green vote or not, I think it's a good thing. And if the left strategizes well, like Polanski has hinted at, they could have a really strong comeback in the next election.
Good stuff. I agree with a lot of that. It remains to be seen. I think, for me personally, I like the idea of the left occupying multiple spaces. Right? I don't think we should sort of stick to one political party. But I suppose the question is, political parties are a vehicle for change. And that's where people are sort of stuck. People are thinking, do we continue with Zach Polansky and the Green Party? And remember, he hasn't won yet. Or do we go with this new political party? I mean, if I inject my personal opinion, if I may, I think that we should still absolutely support Zach Polansky's leadership. I think it's important that he becomes Green Party leader. I don't want to see one party take all. I don't want to see this new Jeremy Corbyn party completely outflank, or not outflank, but take over the Greens. I want them to work together because I actually do think as well, in some areas, the Greens can pick up seats where maybe Jeremy Corbyn can't or this new party can't. Remember, there's a lot of people who really are enthusiastic about the environment. And I'm not saying that the party should be NIMBYs or Green Tories, but if those sorts of people want to vote for the Green Party, I say that's a damn good thing. So I personally think we should support left-wing efforts wherever we go. I really don't want people leaving the Green Party right now. That seems like a massive mistake, especially for a party that doesn't have a name yet. People should stay in the Greens, elect Zach Polansky and see where it goes. I suppose before I wrap up, actually, I want to ask you that. Do you think there's also a risk that lots of people might jump ship before Zach Polansky's leading the party? And also, what do you think of... Because a lot of people aren't really talking about this now, because I think people are growing more confident that Zach Polansky is going to win. But what if Zach Polansky doesn't win and you've got a Green Party led by Adrian Ramsey and Ellie Chowns with this Jeremy Corbyn party? What do you make of that situation there?
So in the case that Adrian Ramsey and Ellie Chowns win the leadership bid, I think it would make more sense to still operate certain seats within the Green Party that they would get, because regardless of my complete disagreement with the way that Adrian Ramsey does his politics and Ellie, they have somewhat of a strong rural area membership, and that is usually the old legacy Green Party members and voters that are more focused on the environment, which by all means, and they sort of lean a bit socially progressive and economically left. So that would be a fine scenario. However, I think in that situation, there would need to be an overt focus on the new party to gain urban votes. What the polls are suggesting, though, is Polansky will likely win the leadership bid. And so in this scenario, I think it's extremely important to take a look at... sorry, I lost my train of thought. I think at the moment it's extremely important to take a look at where this alliance could lead people and not jumping ship prematurely. I mean, this party doesn't even have a name yet. This party doesn't have a proper policy yet. We're not exactly sure what it's going to look like. So I think it's important for where people ideologically are based to stay where they are, but focus on building grassroots community alliances and organizations in order to bring that left coalition going forward. Because ultimately, the winning party of the next election will be a party based on coalitions. I don't think Reform will win alone. So yeah, that's what I find is really important, is just focusing on staying where you are, but building that broad coalition overall.
Interesting stuff. Okay, let's move on to our next story. Trickle-down economics is back. Not that it really went away. Rachel Reeves has announced the scrapping of red tape, which is euphemism for regulation, on the City of London in order for wealth to trickle down. And I kid you not, she used that phrase. Reeves to say cuts to city red tape will bring trickle-down benefits to households. Reeves will claim that cutting red tape for city firms will have trickle-down benefits for households across Britain as she tries to drum up support for a new financial services strategy. Under the Leeds reforms, which Reeves will announce during a summit with top city executives in West Yorkshire, the Chancellor will declare that paring down burdensome regulation is key to unleashing UK growth and ultimately ensuring that households are better off. This is a classic return to Thatcherism. No other way of putting it. Scrapping regulations for the worst kind of people and hoping the rest will get scraps. She was warned about this. But economists and campaigners warned Reeves that deregulating the city came with risks, pointing to the deep recession that followed the 2008 financial crash when the last Labour government was forced to bail out major banks. It feels like Groundhog Day. We've been here before, expecting the financial sector to do most of the heavy lifting in terms of growth, said Chaityana Kumar, head of economy and environment of the New Economics Foundation think tank. We've been living in Groundhog Day for the last 45 years. It's the same crap we've had to endure. Then it's pre-packaged as something new. But not only that, but this is another U-turn from Labour before the election. Keir Starmer, and I think this was during his leadership actually, was attacking trickle-down economics.
That's their politics. Make the rich richer make the super rich even richer. And the theory is that if they're made even richer, some of it may one day trickle down into the pockets of other people. It didn't work last time. Trickle down. It's a piss take.
Oh, it's a piss take, is it? Well, your Chancellor is completely embracing it. Noffel, we've been in a doom loop of neoliberalism for 45 years, but it doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's particularly worrying when we keep talking about deregulating the financial sector and deregulating the markets. And it's completely fine if you want to have that opinion, but I would say let's take a look at the track record. You deregulate in the 1900s, you have the Great Depression. You deregulate again in the late 90s, and what you have is Black Wednesday. You deregulate in 2008, and you have the 2008 financial crisis. What is fundamentally misunderstood about trickle down economics again and again and again is the fact that the private market has some sort of special value that will lead to public investment and getting people back on their feet. But this not only shows that we have not learned any lessons from neoliberalism, it also shows that the Labour Party is heading in a direction to completely replicate that sort of economics. And it's clear, not just in their position, but also their attacks on the disabled, their attacks on trans people, their attacks on immigrants, that they have no radical change for the working people in this country, and all they want to do is shift to culture wars. The worst part about all of this is it will fundamentally mean that we get more of the same, and that will lead to a
Oh, shit. Oh, I think we've lost Noffel there. I thought it was me because actually I realised I was on wireless connection. I've wired myself up, but actually Noffel is gone. He will be back in soon. Oh no! I mean, the guy is so brilliant. We were just getting into the heat of things, but we'll try and get him back. I suppose we could probably, while we wait, look at some of your comments. We don't usually do this. We usually wait to the end, but why not? Let's take a peek. What do we have here? Come on,
should we have a
producer?
quick glance?
Yeah, let's have a little quick glance.
Let's see what we've got going on, particularly with that last story. I'll try and keep away from the ones I've started. I did see some good comparisons for trickle down economics, though. Obviously, austerity is class war. Great name, by the way. Wealth transfer. That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
But I saw somebody else put.
We are
here we
back.
Go. Trickle down didn't work in the first place and only works less over time due to wages not keeping up with everything else. That was one of the comments I starred, but it wasn't the one I was thinking of, actually.
Okay. Sorry, I put it back onto Noffel, so I don't think people can hear you now. But do you remember where you were?
Yeah, I apologize again. This isn't my usual setup. It will be completely fine by the next time I come on. Turn left wouldn't be turn left without major tech issues, so apologies for that. What I was saying was the continuation of this economic agenda will mean two major things, and we're seeing that in America at the moment. One is a radical right-wing populist party that will come in, and they will continue the same sort of economic agenda, and we will look at more heavy gutting of the state, and in order to justify that, you will see a larger scapegoat. So what that will look like is getting rid of Medicare, Medicaid, like Trump is doing, by saying that there are lazy people working, and we're already sort of getting the same rhetoric with Reform UK. At the same time, what you'd be looking at is the erosion of workers' rights in general, because immigrants are stealing jobs or immigrants are being used for cheap labour. And this sort of neoliberal agenda is feeding into that. At the same time, we're going to see a upward transfer of wealth like we did see in 2008. And so I think this sort of unique economic policy of neoliberalism has haunted the UK for about 30 years. And it seems like we are nowhere near to getting out of it. Every time a left movement does try to come up with it, they get shot down for student politics, or they get shot down because of media smear campaigns. And what's really needed to not just divert this from Labour is a Mamdani-style campaign. We need a complete focus on economic populism in order to make sure that we get that message running to directly counter not just the neoliberal agenda, but every sort of scapegoating that comes along with it, because the two are not completely inseparable.
I mean, what's interesting here is that this is obviously a sort of a rescue attempt to boost the growth numbers, because, of course, at the beginning of the year, the first quarter, growth was up. I said it earlier, but basically the reason why growth was looking good at 0.7% was actually because a lot of companies boosted their productivity, and because they were worried about the Trump's tariffs, right? Because obviously you don't want to pay the import tariffs. So companies were boosting their productivity, and that led to some pretty good growth in the first quarter. That has obviously now come down, and Rachel Reeves, her entire platform has been about growth, growth, growth. She's kind of panicked, I think, and just went to the default, which, what is the default policy of governments? It's supporting the wealthy, and it's sort of like a cheat code which says, okay, if we deregulate the financial market, we unleash this wealth on the top, that will boost growth, absolutely. But where's that growth going? Not to the rest of the people. So, do you think this wasn't particularly a calculated thing? I mean, she could have done it from the beginning. Having said that, I'm not saying that her growth policy before this was any good. It was still very top down. It wasn't particularly bottom up or middle out.
Yeah, I think you're on the money. I think this is a sort of default position, not just because of everything that's happened with her performance. Some of it, to be fair, is not completely her fault. We have had global economic ups and downs because of Trump's tariffs. But I think you're right. I think Rachel Reeves doesn't have a plan. Her fiscal headroom's getting abolished by things left, right, and centre, and Labour just do not want to tax the wealth. I think that's the most important thing here. Labour do not want a wealth tax, and so the default position is they don't want to raise taxes anywhere else except for a few places in terms of the national insurance contributions and the farmers tax. They don't want to tackle the main economic issue, and they don't want to raise tax on your everyday person, and they've already done the cuts. So the only default position now here is to unleash it in the private markets because you have no real plan. And because neoliberalism has been the economic agenda of this country for the past 30 odd years, that's all we're going to get. And it makes the bond market and it makes the financial markets happy. And that's all they care about. So I think you're completely correct here. And what's going to happen is your average person is going to be more and more put off what they think is leftist economics. And they'll just turn to the right because Labour is seen as the party that are shy on the economy. They're seen as the left wing of the economy, yet everything they're doing follows the Tories to a T. So this is going to mean that your average person is going to flock to reform, and at the same time, you're going to see an acceleration of Tory-style politics.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is. I call it the default politics. It's so easy just to default back to that, which is neoliberalism. So I agree with a lot what you say there. But let's move on. But before we go to our third story, I just want to say if you're enjoying the stream, then please like and subscribe. Just to remind viewers that we are 5 volunteers. We do not get paid for this work. But one day, we would love for this to be our full-time job. So if you can, then consider becoming a supporter by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you could become a monthly patron, or there is another link for a one-off donation. Of course, you could also become a YouTube member for just 99p. We really, really want to be able to afford a studio. We can have a consistent show. Plus, it means we can have more in-person interviews. So we are aiming to reach an income of £1,500 per month. So again, if you can, then please consider becoming a supporter. But on to our next story. You are all probably aware from the news that a 12-year-old girl was put in isolation and then sent home from school for wearing a Union flag dress to a culture day. This then prompted the school to issue an apology, and surprisingly, the right wing have been all over this. Now, 99% of the time when you hear a story about this, it's usually completely twisted. Read beyond the headline and it's far different to the narrative being spun. But in this regard, a girl was sent home for wearing a Union flag dress on a day about celebrating culture. Now, it is my view that the school was completely wrong. No child should be isolated and no child should be made to feel bad for wearing a British flag at a literal culture event. Having said that, it's important for all context to be included in the story. And whilst it's my view that none of it excuses the actions of the school, it doesn't mean that there isn't a grift at play here. In fact, the grift is obvious. The girl has now been invited to speak at a Tommy Robinson protest.
Yay!
What you happy about, babe?
Tommy Robinson is going to listen to my speech and I'm going to perform it to thousands of people.
Millions.
Billions of people.
Not only that, but the dad is clearly a knuckle-dragging reactionary appearing on multiple podcasts, and he's set up a GoFundMe. I mean, what exactly the funds are needed for is a mystery. I also came across this comment on YouTube. There is definitely more to this story than what is being explained here. I'm a teacher, and we had the same week and there were speeches and costumes like hers. No one in their right mind would just stop a girl speaking about Britain in Britain unless there was something else that this family of hers is omitting. So to only focus on her not being able to give the speech. Got a lot of people commenting about how wrong it is without anyone in the report really saying why it happened. There must be more to it, and it sounds like there is something missing and the school are being diplomatic about it. It's just not common sense to accept the story as it is. Now, of course, this is just a comment with no source, but I have seen a couple of people say the same thing. It is also worth pointing out that it seems like this is a case of an overzealous teacher rather than being a case of the school banning the celebration of British culture. We encourage students to consider wearing attire that reflects their nationality or family heritage. This cannot include sports kits such as football kits. Please ensure that any outfit worn is appropriate for a school setting and holds cultural significance. If your child is unsure about what to wear or has any questions, they are welcome to speak with their form tutor for guidance. If your child chooses to wear cultural dress, the document below must be completed by Tuesday the 8th of July. So, it wasn't a policy, it was just seems like a decision made by the teacher. Now, she also made a speech at the school, and this is what she said. Today, I want to talk about my culture, British culture, and why it's important to me. In Britain, we have lots of traditions, including drinking tea, our love for talking about the weather, and we have the royal family. We have amazing history, like kings and queens, castles, and writers like Shakespeare. It's also modern, diverse, and always changing, with music, fashion, and food from all around the world blending into daily life. And let's not forget fish and chips. It's also the way we speak, our humour, our values of fairness and politeness, and a mix of old traditions and new ideas. But sometimes at school, we only hear about other cultures, which is great, because learning about different countries is interesting and important, but it can feel like being British doesn't count as a culture just because it's the majority. I think culture should be for everyone, not just for people from other countries or backgrounds. Being British is still a culture and it matters too. It's part of who I am. So let's celebrate all cultures, whether they come from far away or right here at home. Thank you. Now, I think that's a pretty reasonable speech if you ask me. I mean, maybe the point about where she says they only hear about other cultures and it doesn't feel like being British counts as a culture is something that seems a bit like the dad has put in there, right? But again, it's no reason to send anyone home. Now, I feel sorry, really sorry for the girl. She's being used as political fodder by the dad and now Tommy Robinson and the rest of the far right. The decision to send the girl home was an appalling one, and it has given a huge amount of ammunition to the far right. I was going to go to Noffel for a second, but I think he's just tapped out again. What's happened is he's on his phone, not his computer. So before we go to him, I'm just going to give my assessment. You've kind of heard my opinion there, right? I don't think there was anything wrong with the speech, really. I mean, maybe that one sentence. But regardless, right, it's a culture event. And if someone wants to wear the British flag, what's the problem with that? Now, of course, the far right, the right-wing media, right-wing politicians are going to use this and run with it and say, once again, we are institutionally anti-British. The schools are teaching woke ideology and to hate British people and white people. That's what they're going to say. Of course, that is a load of bollocks because one, this obviously doesn't happen very often. And two, as we've just gone through, it wasn't policy for the school to send anyone home for wearing a British flag. It sounds like it was just an overzealous teacher, right? Now, of course, the school's come out and apologised as well, but that won't stop the far right. But I think it does throw us a lot of questions. I did really want to get Noffel in for this because it would be really interesting. Because I think generally there needs to be a conversation about. Like, I'm just going to lay it straight, right? I am not someone who considers myself as a progressive patriot or progressive patriotism, right? And the last sort of time that happened was during the Labour Party leadership contest, where Rebecca Long-Bailey pitched the progressive patriotism. It didn't go down very well. I mean, her whole leadership didn't go down very well, but people kind of took the piss out of her. It was quite funny. But I do think in 2025, given the 21st century politics and where we're at, maybe it should be taken seriously. Now, again, I don't think that this is what everyone should be doing. But if someone wants to make that case, I'm not opposed to it. But before we do that, I think we've got Noffel back in. Noffel, I just want to get your assessment of the story. And do you agree with what I've been saying as well?
Yeah, I think this is a complete mischaracterization by the right-wing media in general to fuel culture wars, just as they usually do. The way I've seen this is exactly how you've described, which is one overzealous teacher and the ability to actually put forward what British culture looks like. And I do think that's partly because British culture had been lost to the industrial ages. People used to not reap nationalism as we understand by the state, but they would usually adopt their local community or villages customs. A lot of that has been lost in industrialized cities, and a lot of that has been lost in general. And these customs and traditions are only really carried out in small parts of Britain that have these strong ties and have decided not to give them up. And so I think it's sort of unfair to paint the inclusion and diversity that we have in Britain since the 40s, 50s, all the way to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where a lot of these different countries, different people from ex-colonies came in and integrated within British culture and made their own culture. But more importantly, I think it's quite absurd to keep going on about this culture war. I mean, the right says that they hate identity politics, yet they parrot identity politics all the time. The likelihood is that this was just a one-off occasion where a teacher has got it wrong, stupidly so, and a child is now also, by their parents, being made to be this political ploy. Now, if you ask me, I think the parents would have had these attitudes regardless of no matter what happened. Because when I saw the letter from the school, it said that no flags were allowed. Now, is it still unfair to send a child home? Of course it is. No child should be subject to politics like that. But even within the speech and the contradicting stories that the parents have given and the comments they've made, and now this Tommy Robinson speech, it seems like they already had these underlying tensions, and now the billionaire-backed media is exploiting them to fuel this anti-British agenda, which doesn't really exist. And so I think it's completely representative of the state of what this country's turned into, which is the right claiming that the left have gone all crazy and loony on identity politics, yet only talking about identity politics.
I mean, do you think, just as I was saying before you sort of dropped out, do you think there is a genuine conversation we can have about the relationship with this kind of thing in the left? I mean, do parts of the left embrace progressive patriotism? Obviously, I mentioned how Rebecca Long-Bailey kind of used that as a part of a strategy, didn't really go anywhere. But no, it's not my politics. I'm a Marxist. I look at things through the lens of the material. Culture genuinely takes a back seat for me, but it is clearly important to other people. And I'm not saying that every leftist needs to become a flag shagger, but if there are people within the movement who feel that they want to go in that direction, shouldn't we let them rather than sort of criticise them? I mean, what do you think about that?
I think, listen, Britain has a great history, it has a great culture, and it genuinely has a great story behind it in terms of its industry, in terms of its literature, in terms of its theatre, in terms of its music, in terms of its philosophy. These are all things that are so great about the UK, and these are cultural things that should be celebrated. Do I think we need patriotism necessarily to do that? Not really. I mean, if you want to promote these things, maybe take a look at funding the arts again, maybe take a look at setting up more school trips for children, maybe take a look at giving underprivileged children the ability that wealthy children do to experience these cultural events and these exhibits. The truth is, like I said before, industrialization has meant that a lot of people moved out of their villages, communities, and went straight into cities, and they lost that culture. I don't think the left needs to adopt patriotism, because I'm very skeptical of patriotism. I don't think it's a bad thing at all to love your country necessarily. What I do think is bad is the way elites manipulate that sort of patriotism and say, you're patriotic, go off to Iraq to fight for me. you're patriotic, make sure you attack the other worker at home because they're not Anglo-Saxon. And that's really my issue. I think the left can completely do this. I think there's so many different policies and pathways that we can take that have already been gutted out because of just the shift to capitalism. And there's nothing wrong with British culture inherently. Hey, I just think we need to return to that in a way which gives people the opportunity to understand their history. And we have a great history.
I mean, you're absolutely right that obviously political elites weaponize culture, but that's kind of the point, right? They're very successful at weaponizing culture because typically the left is kind of queasy around it. We kind of sort of don't really want to associate ourselves with it. And by the way, when I say the left, it's very hard to say that because the left is not homogenous. People have different ideas, right? But let's say the modern left and people my age, right? I mean, let's be honest. I speak to people my age and they say, are you patriotic? And they say, I don't give a fuck. Like, what has this country done for me? People are quite apathetic, right? However, you say that, but on the flip side, though, is when there's sort of an external force, such as immigration, quickly these apathetic people suddenly become quite tribalistic. So it's still very deep-rooted, even if they don't want to necessarily show the flag. But I think it's maybe a way of sort of batting off these sort of cultural fights, because look, the left is always painted as anti-British, and again, it is a load of bullshit. Of course it is, but I do think there is sort of internal conversations and internal criticisms when people do want to engage with it. When people say maybe we should, maybe not necessarily completely reclaim the flag, but reclaim parts of it, because it's absolutely true that what the British flag represents is one of colonialism, slavery, and racism. But you could argue it's also one of collectivism. After World War II, when we fought fascism and so many people died, what was our response? Our response was no man left behind. We built the NHS, we built the welfare state, we built council houses, and for 10, 20 years, we had a very collectivist mindset. And you could even argue to go even further, maybe it's a bit cynical, whatever, and say, do you know what? It was Margaret Thatcher that destroyed this British value of collectivism with her neoliberal individualist policies. Let's get back to great British values of caring about people, whether you're black, brown, disabled, an immigrant, or a British national. I mean, I could see how that could work. Oh, we've lost him again. Maybe he didn't like my comment there. I think we're probably gonna move on to our last segment, because it's 8:15. We've got a big segment with the Greens organised group, and of course we've got your comment section. I tell you what, we'll discuss this in the comment section anyway. So let's move on. So before we get to the comments, as I mentioned, we have an exclusive interview with Greens Organised. COG caught up with Steve Jackson earlier in the week, and this is what they had to say.
Hello, guys. You've heard of Steve from Minecraft. This is Steve from Greens Organise, and I'm here to talk to him today about some stuff that I'm actually really excited about. First of all, Steve, how are you doing?
Really well, thank you. I was lucky enough to just go for a swim in the sea, so I'm feeling fresh, and thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, lovely. Love that. So, first of all, let's cover the basics. What is Greens Organised? Can I buy it on TikTok Shop? Is it available on Temu? Is that something that I can purchase online?
Well, we're soon to have T-shirts available online. But so Greens Organised is a network or an organisation made up of overwhelmingly of members of the Green Party of England and Wales. The mission of Greens Organised is basically that we want to level up the Green Party, transform the Green Party into a bold fighting force, a leading force on the left of British politics, a party that stands up unapologetically for the 99% against corporate greed, the media class, milquetoast centrism and austerity. And we recognise that the Green Party has enormous potential that it's essentially not meeting, certainly in my opinion, in the opinion of, I think, the majority of our members. And we have some strategies and some thoughts of like how the Green Party can really step into that moment that I'm quite excited for us to get into. So there's lots of reasons why Reform are polling so well, why Farage has been such a successful politician over the last decade. They've got money because they've got corporate backers. They've got a media class that goes out of its way to platform them. But I think what we've got to remember as well is that they've got a story, a really compelling story. What we've got to do to push back against reactionary far-right narratives is tell a better story, because people don't vote for people like Farage, figures like Trump, because they're horrible racists. Some of them are, but a large part of the reason why those parties and those individuals are so successful is because people are struggling, right? Bills and rents are going up, wages are going down, our public services are crumbling. People are struggling and people are really angry. And what Farage and figures like him are really good at doing is telling a story that turns that anger and that frustration and that disenfranchisement and that anger at the political system into hatred against minorities, into scapegoating, into punching down. The reason why I'm struggling to pay my rent, it's not someone who's arriving on a dinghy. It's not migration. It's the corporate class, it's billionaires, it's inequality. And we need to tell that story.
If you do a sport, to use another analogy, the people who invariably get good at the sport are the people who just turn up, right? They don't have anything special. They're just consistent and they show up for the friends they've made. You hold each other accountable. It keeps you consistent. Greens Organised seems quite big on the idea of in-person meetups and organising. So on a personal kind of social level, someone can actually gain quite a lot from joining Greens Organised. It's a great opportunity to make friends locally and meet up with people who hold the same values, right? There's a lot that somebody could get from meeting people who think like them in their local area through Greens Organised. There's benefits in that direction, right?
I think a lot of those benefits apply to the Green Party generally, but there's certainly something specific about Greens Organised. So I live in Brighton. Last week we hosted our first official Greens Organised Brighton meetup, and it was lovely. Had about 40 people in the room. We had discussions about how we can support local trade union struggles. We had someone do a talk about imperialism and the genocides in Gaza. And the striking thing about it was the mix of kind of backgrounds, ages in the room that you don't tend to get at a Green Party meeting or a more kind of conventional political party meeting. I'm particularly excited about the potential. We're kind of seeing evidence of what that potential looks like, but I'm just really excited about the future and it's all to play for with Greens Organised.
Yeah, when I think about it, I think, I could connect with people kind of local to me who think along these lines, and we could together make a real difference. I do feel like, just speaking about it from a kind of self-centered perspective for a moment, leftists are so often trapped online, and we could be living down the road from another socialist for 5 years and we never once run into them, right? This could really help to mitigate that, as well as helping the Green Party elect candidates who just want a better future, a more, I think, eco-socialist is the term you'd used, future. And the best part is, at least from my perspective, at the moment, you can join the regional WhatsApp groups without even being a member. If you're not quite ready to stand Greens Organised yet, you're a bit anxious, you can join these WhatsApp groups and just listen in. You can hear them out. It literally won't hurt you, and you don't even have to leave your room to do that bit. You don't even have to do the touching grass. But there are also a lot of benefits to being a full member of Greens Organised and joining in full. So first of all, is there a cost to joining? And how much time do you need people to be putting in each month to help make a difference?
These are such good questions. So the way I personally look at Greens Organised is that we've got a central organisation, and then we've got the more important part, which is a decentralised network. And when people join as a member, how much they pay is up to them. We've got 3 options right now. You can at £1, £5, £15 a month if you can afford it. But also, if that's not accessible to people, then no one's turned away for lack of funds. I do encourage people to sign up as a member because you get to vote in our elections. In the future, you'll get to decide what interventions we make. You'll get access to specific members-only spaces. Like Ben's just outlined, there are some spaces that are absolutely open because we know lots of people have questions and scepticisms about the Green Party and about Go. But there will be spaces that are only open to members of Greens Organised. And the financial contribution is pretty huge. Up until a week ago, Greens Organised had been operating with no money, no funding, no big celebrity backers, 100% volunteer time. It's still 100% volunteer time. And we've managed to kind of build this network that has a reach of thousands and thousands of people and has made some really significant interventions without any resources. And now we've got hundreds and hundreds of people contributing financially, and the possibilities with that are really endless.
It's really good, really exciting. I just want to say, because I noticed it, so I brought it on as a graphic. If you join right now, you're in with a chance of winning one of the 100 Greens Organised t-shirts. I don't think you can buy these at the moment. You can only win them, even though they're in the works, and you will be able to buy them in the future.
And the reason why it's the 19th of July is because the 19th of July is the cut-off to vote in that first steering group election. I already know there's loads of people that want to run. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation, contest. And if anyone wants to run or vote, you need to join Greens Organised by the 19th, and then we'll have a month to elect our steering group. They're very exclusive right now. People are calling it this summer's hottest eco-socialist merch.
Excellent, excellent stuff. Where can people go to find out more? And can they contact you if they have more questions?
Oh boy, can they. So people should head to our website, greensorganised.uk. There's our founding document called the Manchester Manifesto. They can access our constitution. They can get a little bit more information about it. They should also head to our social media across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, YouTube. It's all at Greens Organised. If people want to get in touch with questions, I will stress we're completely run by volunteers, and we've gone from 30 people to thousands of people almost overnight. So we're not always able to respond to every question particularly quickly, but people are definitely welcome to email info@greensorganised.uk with a question. You can address it to me if you like, and I'll make a special effort to answer it.
Good stuff, good stuff. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much. And yeah, shout out to the Turn Left team and anyone else who's fighting the good fight of making independent left media, because it's critical.
That was Cog/Ben. I think we can say his name. He did have it on screen there. Interviewing Steve Jackson from Greens Organised. A very fascinating interview. I mean, Greens Organised have been doing some really, really good work. I've wanted to see, a big change in direction of the Green Party, and Greens Organised really, really understand that. So it's good. Got some good people in there. I mean, Helena, No Justice MTG, is also involved, so it can't be all that bad. But it is the time to go to your comments and go to our producer. You can speak to Ben again. Of course, we have lost Noffel, so you've now got ultra widescreen with me. It feels really, really strange, actually. So, yeah.
Curtis has been stretched across two people's screens.
I've been stretched, and it hurts. It doesn't hurt. How are you?
Yes, I am not too bad, Yep, I starred a few comments. We should probably go through Super Chats first and the financial backers first. So we'll just go through. We've got Desi D, who just became a member.
Yes, welcome.
Yes, welcome along. And Phil Nelson, who gifted 5 Turn Left memberships.
Thank you so much, Phil.
They went to Rachel Atwood. Always good to see Rachel. Maximilian Robespierre in the chat. Marxist Chartist, Jay, and Anthony Black. And we also did have this comment from Rachel Atwood as well, which is a little super chat, $2 super chat.
For the Many Party.
Yes, they should call it. And obviously I think this is referring to Corbyn and Sultana's party. The For the Many Party.
It's not a bad shout. Not a bad shout. I mean, what would you say for the short? Just many? I don't know.
Yeah.
For the many.
I still quite like the way the Germans have gone with just the left. So the party that's just the left.
Well, given how the left is sort of seen in this country, I don't know, maybe dropping any sort of reference to the left is a good idea.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. Right. Shall we have a look through? Okay, so we've got this one. Yuri Gibson said, here we go, a left-wing coalition party like in France last year. Haha, we're finally going to start to win on things that our communities desperately need. Good point. And I wanted to sort of draw attention to that comparison, because I haven't seen many people turn this around into like, oh, well, we should get a win like the French managed to get against the far right last year. Like, I haven't seen many people make that comparison. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Zoran Mamdani. I've seen a lot of comparisons to sort of Zach Polanski and his leadership. I haven't seen a lot of comparisons with regard to. I've even seen some Obama comparisons, which are perhaps a little bit off, but
Maybe, I mean, charisma, because look,
Charisma,
Obama
yeah.
certainly has charisma. He just didn't have the policies. But he's also a bit too slick for my liking. He's a guy who's very good for the 2008s, right? Back when people sort of believe what politicians said, or some did anyway.
I can't remember that era when people
Yeah,
believed
true.
what politicians said.
Well.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting comparison, and perhaps something the left should be aspiring towards. It's a good point. And then Kira pointed out that Starmer's telling the left of his party to just leave, but that shows that there's no splitting of the left within Labour because they've shown they're not a left
Well,
party.
quite
And
right.
this is something, yeah, it's something I've seen people have to point out again and again and again to people who are still defending Labour. Like, it's not splitting the left. They're not left wing.
Exactly. You can't say it's splitting of the left when it's essentially two parties that have completely different ideologies. There's a huge ideological rift between the two parties.
Yes.
So how can you say that? It's not like they broadly agree on sort of the economic agenda. That's not splitting. But they're going to say that because they're worried about, obviously, this giving reform a bigger chance of winning, which it will, by the way. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to people. Like, the only political party as it stands that could defeat reform is Labour. But my argument is, without the Greens, without the this new left party, Labour can't defeat them anyway because they can't drum up enough support. Right? They'll stay at home. They've already left. They've gone to the Greens, they've gone to the Lib Dems, and there were people who just won't vote for the Labour Party when they did. And also, they hemorrhaged votes to Reform and to the right. So, yeah, you could say this is splitting the so-called progressive or anti-reform vote. But fuck you. Right? We've been held hostage for far too damn long for us to go, oh, okay, then. No, fuck you. If reform wins, that is on Keir Starmer, that is on the Labour Party, that is on so many things, but not the left.
Well, that was going to happen anyway, because it doesn't quite work the way that liberals think it works. I think a lot of liberals imagine that if people aren't voting in droves for Keir Starmer, then and that if Keir Starmer isn't ahead, then it's because the left aren't doing their job and voting for the candidate that the liberals have said is entitled to win, right? And I think that there's problems with that dynamic, but it also just totally misunderstands the way that voters work. Voters do need to be given a vision to look towards. Otherwise, defining yourself as not the other person, it doesn't inspire anybody. It makes you look just like somebody who's got no idea where they're going. It makes you look weak because it is a position of weakness to always be reacting to what your opponent is doing. You need to be injecting some of your own energy into the electorate in order to get them moving in different directions. And like the centrists don't seem to be able to understand this. It's not even that if all of the lefties voted for Keir Starmer, then he would win the election, because we know from polling numbers that that's not actually quite right. It's that Keir Starmer isn't energising enough people to, like, in general, people who don't consider themselves right or left, to vote for him, because he hasn't got a vision. He hasn't got anything for them to vote for. So they're constantly thinking, well, you're just asking me to vote against Nigel Farage and for the status quo. They're always going to be voting at the moment in opposition to the status quo. I keep saying it again and again and again. It's the era of populism.
Yep, absolutely, era of populism. And I think it started a long time ago. It started with Syriza in Greece. I mean, it didn't start there, but I feel like that's where it really bubbled up, and then Corbyn sort of rode that wave. But it's even more so now. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, sorry, I know you said Syriza as in the Greek party, but I thought you said Theresa, and I was like, oh, Theresa May, she created the left populist movement.
Yeah,
okay,
she's turned into a comrade.
Yeah, she's now she's running Greens organised. Well, I mean, no, she's not really.
to liberals, she's basically a comrade because they love their historical revisionism, right? When someone worse comes along, they're like, "Oh, she wasn't that bad," and then she'll sit on again. Actually, immigrants aren't that bad. I mean, you were the author, you were the architect of the hostile environment. So actually, she is a comrade in people's eyes, because they have such short memories.
That is also a side effect, by the way, of liberals not like asserting a left-wing position. It just means that our political spectrum just gets dragged to the right constantly. The political Overton window just gets dragged right constantly. So they're constantly able to go, oh, well, this Boris Johnson guy is much worse than the Theresa May woman we had before, or the Theresa May woman we had before is much worse than the David Cameron woman, David Cameron man that we had before. It's just like the political spectrum just keeps getting dragged further right, and it keeps getting worse, even to the point where like Labour are more right wing than than large parts of the recent Conservative governments. But also, when it comes to defending the status quo, that story about trickle-down economics, man. So obviously we had Natalie saying trickle-down benefits is a nice way of saying giving rich people champagne and we can all share a cup of their piss, 100%. But there was also Carl, who said trickle-down didn't work in the first place and only works less over time due to wages not keeping up with everything else. I wanted to highlight this because I think it is a really important point that it's not just that it doesn't work the once, it's that it does actually worsen over time. As people get poorer, they're less able to take hold of assets, because it's like, I mean, the point of the game Monopoly is to show that under capitalism, you build assets by already owning stuff. You've already got money. If you're already in a pretty financially secure position, it's easier to build money. And as more and more people in the 21st century are struggling to meet their basic living needs.
It's why it's so important for us to communicate that inequality is a really bad thing, apart from it being unfair. And I think this is when you engage with the mainstream media or right-wingers, they say, I don't care if there's going to be the world's first trillionaire. Good for them. I mean, all that matters is the bottom line. If the bottom line's getting richer, then fuck it, doesn't matter. And it's like... And I think it's a failure for us to communicate, or rather, we don't really get platform to say so, right? It's not like, oh, I'm really, really jealous that rich people are rich and I want to tax them, right? It's not that. It's what Gary Stevenson, I always bring up Gary Stevenson, is what he's been saying, that it's a massive problem with inequality because capital accumulates capital. And your example of Monopoly is fantastic, right? You've got your assets, they appreciate in value, you use that appreciated value to buy more assets, right? The richer get richer and richer and richer, and then they start buying up everything, and that means we own less, and then we have to buy off the richest, and because they're so wealthy, and there's and because it's such a the concentration of wealth is in such a hands of the few, that means there's less competition, so you can't really negotiate prices. Prices go up, whether it's housing, for example, and they can just set everything. They set the rules. So we literally get poorer when the richer get richer. It's not possible for everyone to elevate, right? It's basic Marxist thinking. It's basic class analysis, right? There's two classes, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, the workers and the owners. And they have a direct sort of contradiction in their existence. And one can get richer at the behest of somebody else. So the owner class, the Jeff Bezos, they get richer because people get paid less, because they're owning all the assets, and then people are forced to go to the only people that have it, which is a collection of individuals, and they can charge what they want for it. We are in a rentier capitalist economy. We don't own anything anymore, and that is why it's so important to understand.
Yeah, 100%. Carl did have a suggestion. Carl said they're probably going to suggest the poor sell their organs to help growth at some point. I wouldn't put it past Rachel Reeves, to be honest.
The entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes. Jamie is a girl's name too. Said this was in relation to the last story, the story about the Union Jack dress. Said they're never going to shut up about this. We'll be hearing about this for years.
I suspect you're right.
Yes.
I suspect you're right. And of course, yes, we've commented on it. But of course, we're not going to make a rolling commentary on it because we know how it's going to end up. But I think it's good that when we spoke about the story, we added the context of clearly there's a grift at play. For people, it's not black and white. It's not like one side good, one side bad. I criticised the school. I thought it was bad that they sent the girl home. But it doesn't mean that the other side are angels. The other sides are probably worse. And I don't mean the girl, by the way. I mean the dad. Let's be honest. He's clearly he's right wing. He's a supporter of Tommy Robinson. Yeah.
Yes. By the way, purely from a fashion perspective, she should have been suspended and maybe expelled. Because on a fashion
Geri
level,
Halliwell dress,
it was
right?
it was awful. It was like, oh, dreadful. But that's not to do with the politics of it. That's just
Well, it's one thing to
sequin.
be subjected to right-wing political cannon fodder. It's another thing to dress up as Geri fucking Halliwell. And I think that one's worse, if you ask me.
Yes, indeed. Simon put in the chat, I'm Irish. I have no affinity to the Union Jack, but this was so counterproductive. I think I'm
Yeah.
on the same page
Agree.
as Curtis. I was discussing this in our group chat, and Specs Bean Farmer actually puts it pretty well. Specs Bean Farmer said, I think Billy Bragg is correct. You can't let your English identity be co-opted by the right. The Welsh and Scots seem to do this far better than the English.
Yes,
It is a complex
Scotland's-
question.
Scotland is is, but Scotland have done it very well. Where Scottish nationalism has been more about independence rather than culture and race. Now I know that people were saying the Brexit movement was about independence, but of course the leaders of those movements were Nigel Farage, whereas Nicola Sturgeon, who's outflanked every mainstream politician to the left on everything, including trans rights, and she was a leader of the Scottish National Party calling for separation. So the Scots have done it well. So I don't think... I think the context is obviously different here, given that, not that Scotland never engaged in colonial practices, but of course England is the real big hitter here, and I suppose it's sort of seen as breaking away from the big empire. There's obviously that sort of undertone to it, but I do think that Scotland have sort of, and Wales as well, talking about an independent Wales, they have got something there which maybe the English can do. Who knows?
It is a bit of a complex question, though. In the question of so I wrote a essay on this when I was in university, talking about nationalism and comparing nationalism to religion. Like, is nationalism religious in its nature? And one of the problems with nationalism is that because it's such an ill-defined concept, the idea of somebody's nationality, it often falls into the habit of what we'd call apophatic philosophy, or via negativa. It's basically the idea that it comes from religion, religious groups, the idea that God is too perfect to define by saying what he is, so you have to say always what God isn't, right? And the philosopher, it was Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, compared it to like carving away like a marble block. If you imagine a marble block, the way that a sculptor carves away a marble block and reveals the image underneath, that's the via negativa in process when defining God, right? The problem is when people try and define these ethereal concepts, such as nationalism, so often they have to define them against something. And it so easily falls into the pattern of, if you're a power that's been subject to colonialism, like the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, if you look around the world, Palestinian nationalism, it's so much more left-wing. There's a reason for that, and that's because a lot of these countries that have been subject to colonialism and never really escaped that colonialism as well, in particular, they can define themselves against the empire that they were fighting or continue to fight to this day.
Which is why, by the way, sorry to cut you off, but it's why the left views this as it is why the left sort of looks at the British flag, and especially those who fucking dress up in the British flag suits, and we sort of roll our eyes, because it's different, right? Obviously, the right wing will say, why can't people run around with a British flag, but other countries can? And it's like, first of all, you can run around with a British flag if you want. No one's fucking stopping you from doing that. But the reason why there's a level of skepticism with British nationalism or English nationalism is exactly what you've said. Like, Palestinian nationalism is because they're literally under occupation for 80 years. They're facing a genocide. They're facing annexation. So that is a defense of their own homeland, right? In our context is we fucking the British Empire. We owns most of the world. So sort of browbeating at our flag is obviously different. It's like the bully celebrating a win rather than the underdog winning. So that's why we see it as it is. Explaining that to normies, though, still goes over their heads, which is why in political strategy, I'm not saying that the left needs to embrace all of this. I'm just saying that some might within the movement want to do that, and I think let's just maybe give them a break or don't overly criticize them. I can see what they're trying to do.
I think so long as we don't lean on it too much, it's fine. So here's
Yeah.
the thing. Obviously, from that, you get the idea that, for example, Scots can easily define their nationalism because they define it against the British, right? When British nationalism comes along, so often it just falls into the pattern of defining itself against an insider, defining itself against the immigrants that are coming over, the LGBT, the transes, like whoever it happens to be that's this scapegoat of the month that's coming in and ruining our culture that's otherwise perfect, right? I think if we want a left nationalism that's effective, it's got to be a put that flag down if you don't stand up for the British working class. If you don't stand up for the people, the people of Britain who are a multicultural and diverse culture, right? If you're not standing up for those values, put the flag the fuck down. Like, I'm fine with people carrying the flag. I'm more interested in what are the values of the person carrying that flag. You can carry the flag, but I'm interested in are your values correct for what we consider the values that we want for the future that flag is supposed to represent. If not, put it the fuck down. And that should be like our message going forward to them.
Autumn, I didn't actually see a comment, which just proves that great minds think alike.
True.
So say that. I'm an internationalist, right? That's what I support, but I don't know if there's a contradiction with someone who's like can you be a sort of patriotic internationalist? Maybe you can. I don't know. I mean, like, at the end of the day, we all love to get in the swing of things when it's like football. When the World Cup sort of comes on, I'm waving my English flag, and I'm not particularly that patriotic because I'm so angry with our political leaders. And this country is going to the shit. There's not much I'm patriotic about. But I tell you what, when the football comes on, it's a different story. And I think maybe that's kind of what I mean by it, like in a harmless way, right? And I think as long as you don't lean into it too much. But these are sort of, I mean, this is me thinking out loud, right? This isn't a formulated opinion, because my opinion is I'm an internationalist. So I'm sort of just spitballing here. But I love conversation, I love debate. So I think maybe opening up to someone who is more well-versed on this, we could maybe get an interview with someone on it. I think it'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, I did think, by the way, just I remember putting this in the group chat actually when we were discussing this. I did think that the teacher could have handled it so much better and dealt with all of this by simply asking about like if the question of like, oh, British culture is being erased, which is kind of implied in the speech. It's kind of like, oh, it feels like you're not able to celebrate British culture. Like you can ask, okay, the question from the teacher should have been, let her finish, and then go, okay, what made you say that line? What makes you think that? Why do you feel that way? Because then the onus is on her, and I think potentially her father's beliefs that have been ingrained into her to come up with an explanation, right?
Without doubt. I mean, to be fair, if I was the teacher, I wouldn't even question it, because I'm like, they're 12 years old, let's just sort of move on. But if it was like if it was an older person, an 18-year-old or older, right, and this is like a bit more of a serious discussion, then you're absolutely right. Question it. Say, why is it you feel like that? And wait for them to come up with the answer. And if they ultimately might go, oh, well, it just feels like it. I mean, fucking feelings don't mean anything, right? But obviously in that situation, when it's like 12-year-old kids, I just wouldn't even done anything about it. Just ignored it and maybe went home for, oh, that was a bit of a funny speech. Clearly your dad wrote that. That's it, really. I mean, I think that's all that should have happened, which is precisely nothing.
Yeah, no, I think I probably would have questioned it, just to like, and not in a like harsh way, just to like, okay, why do you think that, to try and get her thinking about because honestly, with de-radicalization, a lot of the time, a lot of the methods that are used in de-radicalization, I'm thinking of particularly the Good Lad Project, which does workshops with men and takes them through like Andrew Tate radicalizing stuff, and says, okay, so if you follow these ideas through to their conclusion, where do they lead, and gets them to apply the logic to different scenarios and think, okay, what is the logical outcome for this scenario? Often just walking them through the logic is a great way to like de-radicalize people who are early on in the pipeline or at risk of falling down the pipeline, which a 12-year-old would almost certainly fall into. I think it'd probably be harder at 17, 18 to get them to engage with the conversation.
Maybe there's we should check out. Is it Mike Sivia? Sivia, is that how you pronounce his name? Their name. Done an excellent video on British values, so maybe we can check them out. And I'd love to have someone on about this actually.
Yes. That is all I had in terms of comments. So if you want to close out the show, that sounds great.
Do you want to? There's been a very generous super chat. If you want to bring that up.
Oh, sorry, I completely missed that. Let's just have a quick look. Oh, okay, yep. Cops. So, Cops said, brilliant topics tonight and great chat. Some great comments. Thank you so much, Cops. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. 20 quid. Had a lot of money. And I agree. I think tonight's been a really great show because it's been quite interesting. We've delved in areas, particularly on the third story, where we might not have gone before.
Sorry,
and I like where this has opened up. Sorry.
I just wanted to drop because I noticed Les also gifted 5 Turn Left memberships.
Les.
Apologies, Les. I didn't see this until I went back to the super chats. There's basically a different
comrade
tab.
Behind
Money. Yes,
Cog.
exactly. And that made Sunday, The World's End, Emily, and Davy Nicol, all members of Turn Left. We thank you so much. You are all fantastic. Oh, and Bob Gnarly. Sorry, missed one there. And Bob Gnarly, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a great name, by the way. Yep, superb. Thank you so much, guys. Excellent stuff.
Perfect. I think that is it for the show. And that is all we have time for. Thank you to all our viewers who tuned in. Thank you for the super chats. Really interesting show tonight, I got to say. A bit of an extra long show as well. And of course, I want to thank Noffel, who was on earlier. Connection issues with his phone again. I want to thank Cog for producing. Remember to like this stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you can, of course, become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you so much. It's been a while. I'm glad to be back in the hot seat. And I will see you next time.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn Left.